probably the most formative conversation that I had, even though it was a very, very brief conversation, was one with the physicist John Wheeler. So Wheeler was this legendary American physicist who came up with the terms black hole and wormhole, and he did revolutionary work in everything, general relativity, nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, and had a very sort of profound philosophical mind, but also spoke in this very enigmatic, Yoda-like way. And I had the chance to meet him. Well, this is a whole long story, but my father and I snuck into a physics conference that was being held in Wheeler's honor. It was in honor of his 90th birthday at Princeton. And this is in 2002, I believe. And it was this amazing conference, and all the, best physicists were up there giving talks and everything. And Wheeler was just sort of sitting at the front. And, he was 90 at this point. He was a bit hard of hearing, but he was still deeply obsessed with all of these big questions about, how come existence and why the quantum and all of the questions that I think you, Curt, are interested in. And so, at some point after the talks, we kind of waited our turn and we got to go up and talk to him. And Wheeler had this idea that somehow observers are implicated in reality, in the nature of reality. And the question that I really wanted to ask him was, if observers create reality, where do the observers come from? So I asked him this. We had to repeat it a few times because he was a bit hard of hearing. And then he said, the universe is a self-excited circuit.
Okay.
And then we said, okay. And then my dad and I were very obsessed with this question about what is nothingness. And Wheeler had talked a lot about nothingness. And so our second question was, does everything come from nothing? And he said, the boundary of a boundary is zero. And we said, okay, thanks. And we walked away. And then we were sort of, what the hell just happened?
Right.
So Wheeler had basically presented us with these kind of riddles. And I, in a certain way, have spent like much of my career trying to figure out what he meant by those phrases. So I think that was definitely the shortest, strangest, but most influential conversation that I had.
So what's meant by it's a self-excited circuit and the boundary of a boundary is zero? How is that at all connected to your question?
So Wheeler passed away in 2008, but he, throughout his whole career, had kept journals, these very, very detailed journals. Every conversation he ever had, every thought he ever had are in these notebooks. And he donated them all to the American Philosophical Society Library in Philadelphia. So you can go there and read through all the journals. So I spent a very, very long time combing through these journals, trying to figure out what was he really getting at. And yeah, so the idea of a self-excited universe, I mean, in a nutshell, he had this notion that, well, first of all, he saw quantum mechanics as giving us a kind of participatory reality, as he would put it, where you don't have some reality that's just sitting out there some particular way, independent of observers, but observers and the universe sort of come together and participate in the creation of reality. And reality is sort of ever on the make in this story. And so he wanted to give a story. There's a famous diagram he drew that was a U, the letter U,
yes,
with an eyeball at the top. And this is supposed to capture this idea of a self-excited universe. So the U is for universe. And the idea is kind of the universe comes into being and gives rise to an observer, and then the observer looks back in time. This is related to Wheeler's delayed choice experiment. So the observer looks back in time, and through the act of a quantum measurement participates in creating the very universe that created the observer. So it's this kind of strange loop, and this was his idea of a self-excited universe, which he never fully was able to flesh out, but that was he called it like an idea for an idea. And then the boundary of a boundary is zero. This is a trickier one. There's a sense in which it's a very basic concept in, I guess, topology, that once you bound a space, you don't have to put a boundary on the boundary. The boundary of the boundary is always equal to zero, which apparently you can actually derive a lot of physics out of this very sort of tautological statement. But he wanted to say something a little deeper with it, like that there are ways, he called it a principle of austerity, that there are ways that you can get so much out of so little. So he was trying to reduce physics essentially to something like the identity of like 0 equals 0, and then be able to say that you could derive all of physics from this. I mean, this was just one program that he worked on that, again, it was an idea for an idea. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't think these were the answers, but they were very inspiring to me in my thinking, and also just sort of presenting physics as this great mystery that needs to be solved.
John Wheeler, one of the most influential physicists of the 20th century, proposed a controversial idea that physicists are still debating to this day: the idea that we live in a participatory universe. Wheeler said to imagine a cosmic version of the double-slit experiment, where light from a distant quasar passes by a gravitationally lensing galaxy. It can go either to the left or to the right of the galaxy. Now here's the twist. We could choose to measure which path the light took, or we could choose to observe an interference pattern after the light has already passed the galaxy. But this choice, where we determine if a photon is a so-called particle or a so-called wave, is made billions of years later, after the light began its journey. This idea is captured in his self-excited diagram, where the universe creates observer participancy, which in turn creates information, which creates the universe. Are we passive observers of a predetermined universe, or active participants in an ever-evolving interdependent web that we call reality? So the participatory universe is just one of several interpretations of quantum mechanics. Can you explain what are these so-called interpretations of quantum mechanics? And then what is the participatory universe and transition into QBism?
Yeah, so quantum mechanics, it's funny, I just watched, there's a mathematical physicist, Marcus Appleby, who gave this talk at Dartmouth College this past week, who he was comparing our understanding of quantum mechanics to long COVID. So he was sort of saying that, there's been all these revolutions in science over the centuries. And normally it's, Copernicus comes along and, it says, oh my God, everything you thought was wrong. And there's this initial deep, deep shock, which is sort of the disease that you have to get over. But then eventually you just get over it and you move on. And he said quantum mechanics is unlike that, because, it's been well over 100 years and and we're still suffering from the disease. He called it long classicality.
Interesting.
So it's the shock is so great in quantum mechanics that we still have not figured out how to really process it. And because of that, we have all these different interpretations that try to give almost a narrative account of what the mathematical formalism of quantum mechanics is trying to tell us about reality. And so you have the many worlds interpretation, you have objective collapse, you have relational quantum mechanics, you have Bohmian mechanics, you have QBism. So there's all these different interpretations that try to say what it is that quantum mechanics is really telling us.
Mm-hmm.
And they differ substantially. I mean, it's sort of remarkable that you can give such radically different interpretations of the same theory. And in a sense, it's philosophical temperament. It's what do you want your reality to be? And then you try to construct a story that's consistent with quantum mechanics. And the thing about quantum mechanics is it makes it very, very hard to give a consistent story. You have to, I think the central lesson is whatever the story is, it can't be classical physics. We can't go back. So something has to give. And so, for instance, people who like, Bohmian mechanics or something, I would say, I imagine they would agree, really want something as close to a classical reality as possible. So they really want there to be a freestanding reality that just is some particular way. And if we have any uncertainty, it's just because we don't know what the truth is, but there is a truth out there with a capital T. And but, when you look at what you have to do, the kind of contortions you have to twist yourself into to say anything that, they're so extreme. You have to give up on relativity. You have to allow for, crazy non-local effects. You have to allow for what they call non-contextuality. You have to allow for contextuality. What you end up with is still not a classical reality. It's something incredibly, incredibly strange. It's the same with many worlds. Many worlds also kind of has a classical impulse there. But the price that you pay is this, infinite number of universes where everything that can happen is happening, and an infinite number of you in all these universes. So the point is, these interpretations make it very clear that whatever quantum reality is, it's not your grandfather's reality.
What's interesting is he called it long classicality. So he sees our adherence to thinking classically as the disease.
Yes.
He doesn't think of quantum mechanics as the disease that needs to be tamed.
No. I mean, I think, and that's the real spirit of QBism, which we can talk about. Is QBism is sort of saying, okay, let's embrace what quantum theory is saying and just get over these kind of classical impulses that we have.
So there's someone named Richard Hamming. I'm not sure if you know who that person is. He's a physicist / engineer, has a fantastic series on YouTube about learning. It's from the 80s, I believe. It's just a fantastic watch. He said that people form their interpretations of quantum mechanics based on their prior metaphysical beliefs.
Yes.
So he said this is true of Einstein, and this is true of Bohr. Christopher Fuchs had this lecture on QBism, and he said that what was different about QBism is that it started with, let's take quantum mechanics seriously, and then let's see what occurs from there. Let's let that dictate our interpretation rather than our prior beliefs dictating it. At least that's what he said. But that's how most scientists to view their work, is they're the rational person who goes in without preconception, and then I let the data tell me. And I am so disjoint from my ego that I'll follow the data wherever it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.